This is that 625 Super Reverb that we recapped yesterday or day before and did the face panel on yesterday. It's not really when I did it, it's when you saw the videos. But anyway, so like a lot of these things, like the Twin, you can see the longer safety ground for the AC cable here. It's soldered to chassis. You can see the repopulated, redone, and cleaned bias board, some 100 ohm heater balance resistors with the taped off. I don't know if you can see it, but I taped off the center tap for the HT center for the heater center tap. You still have the HT center tap here going to chassis. You've got the reservoir cap going to chassis. Cleaned everything. Everything's much cleaner. You can just see here one of the new 3-watt 470 ohm screen grids, and I replaced the grid stoppers on the output tubes with some 1.5K carbon composites. You can see here, just like the Twin, everything I'm showing you now is pretty much just like that Twin, so I don't need to show you the details of how to do this. This bias had a 27K resistor to ground that had drifted to 30-something K, and the bias was very, very cold. I've replaced that actually with a 15K, which gives a better range with modern wall voltages, though the owner will be using it at 114 volts, like his other 60s Fenders. With 114 volts coming out of the wall, this with a 15K gives a good range of adjustment. And again, that added 22 microfarad there from the wiper reduces some remaining hum that a lot of people just live with old amps, but it's not necessary. And just like the Twin, you can see you've got the capacitors installed to make new dual section caps with 2 positives and 1 negative. And the 4.7 microfarad here across this 100K on V5B. All the original signal caps are in place. We may revisit this one, and we'll probably turn our attention here for reasons that you'll see in just a moment. Let me power this on so I can show you some the things that are remaining to be done. It's looking much better, but it's not ready for prime time yet. The sequence of the things I'll be showing you are not in order of importance, just rather what's easy to show at one time. So on the normal channel, I plug in here, you can hear the sound come up, but no real sound. If I go into the low gain jack, what's going on here, you can see this pretty clearly once I get this plug up. The shunt on the 2 jacks should look like this, kind of a straight piece of metal. But you can just see here that it's been bent. It goes like this and then down. And someone probably did that to make it shunt to ground when nothing's plugged in, because it's probably gotten weak over the years. When you plug in now, because the metal was bent so much, it doesn't unshunt. If I move the jack, move the plug, so I'll be trying to unbend that, but I expect I'll have to replace that jack. Let me show you one other thing on this channel, though. So I'm going into the low gain jack so I can, you can hear it. You hear that signal cutting out? That's been happening intermittently to the amp in general, and I'll track that down. It's kind of worrying. It sounds like a bad connection somewhere, but I've not found it yet. But aside from that, this is a very microphonic tube. All the other 12X7s in this amp are groove tubes, sorry. This one is still the original RCA. And rather than make the owner buy a new tube to get rid of that microphonics issue, I'm gonna move this groove tube from V5 to V1 and move this microphonic but still functional RCA 12X7 to V5, because that's just on the tremolo channel. That's just the tremolo circuit, not in the audio path, so it doesn't matter if it's microphonic. And while, yeah, perfectly operational RCA 12X7 is more valuable than a groove tube labeled probably JJ or Sovtech, I haven't looked closely. it's not that much appreciable difference in performance. That cutting out of sound seems to be linked to the output jack. It just may be dirty contacts. I'll play around with that some more. So now we don't have that microphonics there, and the vibrato channel microphonics don't matter. So I've got an input jack to solve, and then the output cutting out and occasionally popping. Those are separate issues. Let's go to the Vibe trim channel. I've got fairly high noise floor. Some DC on the guitar input. And the reverb. It's got a pretty good buzz / hum. And also some DC on the pot. That may just be a dirty pot. In just a minute, I'll show you what's causing those things and what we'll do to fix it. But while I'm on this channel, let me turn on the tremolo. So it's really abrupt, it's ticking, and its minimum speed is too fast. So even if you turn the intensity all the way off, you still get that ticking so long as the roach is going. That's an easy fix. All that stuff in the tremolo should be an easy fix. And I'll show you the root causes of that. One other thing that I can't show right now, I first had this amp hooked up to its original 4 CTS Alnico speakers, but it was cutting out. I was using the other end of this cable, which is that you can't see what I'm looking at. I was using the other end of this cable, so the male end of the cable, into a female quarter-inch to female quarter-inch adapter made by Switchcraft, then to the plug of the old speakers. But the plug on the old speakers itself is intermittent, so I'll be opening that up and resoldering that. But before I get to the tremolo and DC on and noise on the reverb, I want to take a look at the wiring in the output jack area and make sure that I've not missed something crucial. I also want to make sure that this plug is good, just in case. I've been using this speaker cable and the speaker plug for a couple of years now, and they get moved around a lot and plugged in and out of things, and just make sure that nothing's going wrong in here that I'm blaming the amp for. This is an Amphenol. Has this nice, pretty strain preventer. What do you call it? Strain reliever. Which does not want to move right now because it's been in place for so long. I don't know what you can see, but I'm looking at my connections in there. And they are still solid. I'll put this back together. Make sure it's really tight. I'm going to clean all these surfaces and clean these jacks and see if that intermittency goes away and see if that pop is related to that intermittency. I didn't think there'd be anything wrong with this cable, but assumptions occasionally bite you in the butt. So if you have a problem like this, include your speaker cable in the analysis, and that includes the other end. So let me check the other end of it because I was having problems at the other end when it was plugged into the old speaker plug. I just want to rule that out. Another very exciting video for you guys. But this is the shit that matters. all that looks good, but I can see a little bit of tarnishing here. I think I reversed the ends of the cable. This is the end that's usually going in and out of amps and more exposed. The other end of the cable is usually tucked away, behind a speaker cable. Just doesn't get exposed to dirt that much. So we are going to clean this before we go any farther. I'm going to start with some isopropyl. And then see if I need to go to anything more, like deoxit. I'm not seeing any oxidation, though. I'm just seeing dirt accumulating. So I think that might have done the trick. Let's put this one back together. That should be much better. Let me connect that back, and we'll confirm that we don't have any problems after I clean this jack a second time. Suppose I should mention, if you're doing this yourself for the first couple hundred times, unplug the amp from the wall before you reach around. You need to know exactly what you're working on. If I were to reach around here, I could touch the mains and get electrocuted. Or shocked if you're one of those who insists that electrocution means death. I'm not going to get into that semantics argument here. I dropped my nut. Just kind of moving the heater wires out of the way. You might not have seen what I was just doing. I was saying I was putting my hand up like this, and I know where I'm at in the amp. If I put my hand over here, that's where the mains connection are. You can electrocute yourself that way. Don't do that. There's the mains there, and there's standby voltage there if that's on, so, or if there's any stored in the amp. So I already cleaned these, but I want to clean them again, especially here where the jack makes contact, because I just did a kind of a cursory clean. I don't think I have a problem here, but I want to be sure. So for this, I'm looking at it. It's not really tarnished. Sometimes you'll get them and they'll be really a buildup of dark black looking stuff or dark brown stuff, in which case I'll use very, very fine abrasives in combination with solvents. In this case, I think just hitting it with some deoxit should do the trick. And I'll do it to mate, though I don't know if anyone's ever plugged into that over the years. And just to be thorough, I want to make sure that the sleeve is going to make good contact, and I don't want to spray deoxit all over into the amp, so I'm going to put some cloth behind it as I spray. Get any excess off. Do its mate. Getting inside where the plug goes, and I'm getting the outside where it's going to make contact with the chassis. Now I've got a little deoxit on this cloth. That should be sufficient just to hit that bit of the chassis again. I already cleaned it with ISO, but a bit more where the deoxit never hurts. I know that these are clean because they soaked for about 15 minutes in isopropyl yesterday, and they look pretty much brand new. Tooth washers are thawing out. Another reason to unplug the amp before you do things like this. You think you're fine, and then a little piece of metal just slides over where it should not be, and zap, bang. All right, start it by hand. Tuck the wire in, and now I'll tighten it up. And again, because people ask, I'm not putting nearly as much torque on these as you think. If I were holding it back here and doing it, that'd be a tremendous amount of torque. That'd be way too much torque. I tend to hold them here. I choke up on them. So I apply more torque than I could with my fingers. But it's very controlled, and I can feel the resistance. I know I'm not going to strip them here. If I were down here, even with these steel jacks, I could strip the threads or break something. I'm not going to do it from here. That's too much force. This is the right amount. All right, so let's see if any of this addresses that weird cutoff and occasional poppings we were getting. Okay. It is better, but I don't trust it long term. I think we've got some classic metal fatigue happening. I think the metal that gets bent to the side when you insert the plug has had a plug left in it for 60 years. Not quite, almost 60 years. 58 years? And it's probably in need of replacing. So I don't think it'd be a bad idea to replace the input jacks and the speaker jacks on this amp to just eliminate those issues entirely. I will talk to the owner and ask whether he wants me to replace just the one input jack and both output jacks, or all the input jacks so that they cosmetically match. Or if he wants, I can tape off the back of a brand new input jack and just expose the bushings to some white vinegar to kind of age it, and use the old jack's nut so the new jack from the outside would look like an old jack. The things we do for love, you know? But that's a much better place to be, and I don't expect to have too many problems with this, but that is a good example of metal fatigue. I guess I should show you that. This is what I'm talking about. This piece of metal is just bent metal, and it's supposed to have pressure going this way. It's supposed to have a spring force going this way, so it makes good contact with this this plug. But if I really move the plug around in there, it makes and breaks its connection. Not as bad as before. That just tells me that there's not enough pressure this way. This should be pretty much rock solid. So, it is just bent steel that's been pushed that way for 58 years when it needs to be pushing that way. Switchcraft 12As are not expensive, so not a deal breaker. Let's move on to the reverb noise, I think. All right, I've shown this in other videos, but it never hurts to show again. Right here, this is V2A, V2B. Sorry, I touched the plate resistor, and I've got the meter on. And right here, let me turn let me pull V4 so we don't hear the pops of what I'm about to do. All right, might still come through. Not so bad. All right, so right here, I've got 279.4 volts. Right here, I've got 399.6 volts. And here, which is feeding the dry portion of the reverb channel, I've got 388 millivolts. It should be 0 or less than 10 millivolts. And here on the other side of this 500 picofarad, I've got 84 millivolts. Right here where I have 84 millivolts, that is feeding the reverb driver stage, that is injecting buzz into the reverb. And here, now it's up to 400 millivolts, that's injecting noise and DC into the dry part. So what I'm going to do is power the amp off and leave it in standby. So it's going to drain all the filter caps through those 220K bleeder resistors we talked about. And I can confirm that here. It's at 6 volts going down. Here it was 400 a minute ago. Now we're at 5.2, 5.1, 5. It's going down. So it's safe for me to get in there and poke around. I've got to remove these two capacitors and these two resistors. And I'm adding a bit of fresh solder to the old solder because in the process I'm transferring a bit of fresh flux into there, which will make that old solder flow. Let's see if I can do this without burning myself on camera. Boy, those heat up pretty fast. I don't want to put too much strain on the leads of these caps because they can break off bits of the coating. And these caps are probably just fine. But they'll be finer if I don't break off the coating. There's a little bit of wax on there. I'll clean that off. Let's see. Might need to use our friend the dental pick. We will reuse these resistors because they measure just fine and they are not noisy. Let's see if I can get this to come out neatly. There's one. Now this one, I think, is being used to jumper under the board to the other B+ eyelet. Yeah. So I'm just going to get this up and out of the way for right now. And we'll get that little bit of solder up. Clean up some little bits and bobs of stuff. Now I want to get all the old solder out of the eyelets we just removed components from. This will make sense in a moment if you've not seen me do this before. That's got a lot of solder in there. That's a good start. I'll follow up this solder sucker with the desoldering braid, which is good at getting the last remaining bits out. I'll move these wires out of my way. I know where they go. If you don't know where all this stuff goes, by heart, take lots of pictures, refer to the layout, make drawings, whatever you need to do so you can put everything back the way it was. All right, now let's use the braid to get a little bit of the stuff out. I have found that the old solder in these joints over the years becomes, desiccated. And it's like all the flux has been driven out of it and it wants to go grainy if you reheat it too many times. Plus, I don't want a whole bunch of solder puddling up between the two boards. If I add more solder and add more solder and add more solder, you can just get pools, and things can bridge where they should not and connect where they should not. Or you can have just blobs of random solder floating around. I'm getting some of the excess solder off these old cap leads while I've got the iron nice and hot. And a few I'll go through and clean these off with some isopropyl and some cloth because they have a wax coating. But what I want to do now is going to sound really strange to people. I'm going to remove the backing board from this amp. This has a main board here, and then has a backing board, the insulation board, to keep it, the eyelets on the back of the main board from contacting the steel chassis. But that can also trap yuck over the years and trap moisture and contaminants. And I'm about to soak the board in isopropyl so I can get rid of that DC that we measured. And I find it dries a whole lot faster if there's not another piece of wet board beneath it. So let me just kind of get everything positioned down here. See how successfully I can do this. On some of them it's easy. Sometimes, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to do it yet because the reservoir ground wire is in the way. So I need to heat up my big soldering iron, chassis iron, to get this wire moved so I can pull this board out and then I'll put it back afterwards. It's worth it, trust me. And I think while the big soldering iron is heating up, because it takes about 15 minutes to come to temperature, I'm going to grab a sandwich. It's lunchtime here. All right. I'll put that back later. Let's see, where'd that thing go? I'm just going to slide this board out. It can be tough to get started. Sometimes they get stuck to the chassis. Just adhesion over the years, dirt and stuff in the air. Sometimes they'll hit a screw. Sometimes they, they just warp along with the top board in such a way that they kind of get locked in place. Be a lot easier to do if I didn't have the camera here in my way, but I figured you guys would want to see this. More or less. You see why I needed to move that one wire. And you can see some puddles of flux. Nothing too bad. Sometimes these are really nasty. In the later 70s amps, these things are coated in wax, and it just becomes a conductive nightmare. You'll have big puddles of wax here that bridge, you can see where the eyelets are that have transferred just from heat. That wax will just puddle up and you get all kinds of shorts through the wax as it gathers contaminants and becomes conductive. So I'll give this a deep cleaning in a few. But let's get back to this area here where we have DC that we don't want to have on these eyelets. There should be 0 volts DC here, 0 volts DC here, but there's 400 volts DC here. And, just over a 1/4 inch away, we've got this eyelet which has 400 volts on it. And as the board absorbs moisture and traps contaminants on its surface, you build up a conductive path from 400 volts to here. And that's why we had almost half a volt here. I've measured as high as like 10, 12 volts here on some amps. Those are really buzzy. And it's just nice to get everything clean. Sometimes it'll leak over here into the treble cap as well. I've not found that in this amp, but it's possible. Sometimes it'll leak over here. You can get it all over throughout the board at various points. Sometimes the phase inverter, the mixer resistors will pick up some DC from the point between the cathode and the tail resistor and the phase inverter. That's another spot where you can get some DC. But this is almost always built up in 60s Fenders right here. And so what we're going to do is we're absolutely going to soak this area of the board in isopropyl. I mean, I'm serious. Don't skimp on it. Try to keep it off the white labels of the Blue Ajax caps because they can discolor if they get isopropyl on them. If it happens, just don't touch them and let them dry. As the isopropyl evaporates, they'll usually go back to white and the text is not affected. But if you were to wipe it off, you might smear the ink at the moment that the ISO's on there. Anyway, and now that we've got tons and tons of isopropyl in there, just like I showed you in the video on the caps, we're going to heat those eyelets up and drive isopropyl away from the eyelets, and the isopropyl will displace any water that's in there and will drive out the water in those areas as well. I don't know if the mic's picking up the hiss that's happening there, but you can see that it just spreads out in concentric rings from the eyelets as it pushes the isopropyl away and hence any water away. And you want to make sure in this area that your concentric rings from each eyelet are well overlapping with their neighbors here. And this will usually eliminate all that leaky DC. And this is why I wanted to remove that backing board as well, because otherwise I'd have water, and not water, isopropyl going through these eyelets down between the boards and getting trapped there. And it takes a lot longer for it to all evaporate out. As far as the rest of the ISO that's on the board right now, you can evaporate it with a heat gun, or you can just let it sit. It will all evaporate out. In this case, I had a phone call come in, so I did not get to have that sandwich. I'm going to let this stuff just kind of evaporate because we don't want to apply any DC while there's any liquid, because it is very conductive. And right now that would be a bad thing. Now, there may be some other areas of the board where we need to do this later. I won't know until I've eliminated this, because this is putting enough buzz on the reverb that, and I know it's from DC that I've measured here, if there's any other problem in the reverb circuit, I can't know. This buzz will mask it. All right. So that's a much better place, or will be once that the remaining ISO evaporates. And like I said, I'm going to soak this and wash this like you've seen me do to the boards on the bias supply. But I'm going to do that over my trash can, not here on camera. So next time you see this, it'll be clean. I'm going to have a sandwich after I soak this. All right, about 20 minutes later, this is all clean and it's all dry. Let's see, which way does it go? Always fun guessing these things. It's got to be this way. So I'll slide this back in. Just confirm that the holes line up before I redo that ground wire. Yeah, all right. Let's put this ground back in place. Let's put those screws back in place. Notice I'm pressing down as I do this. Kind of take some of the wave out. It occurs to me that earlier I said this amp was 58 years old, but it's 2024, so 59 years old. I'd say she's doing just fine, wouldn't you? Alrighty now, let's repopulate this area over here. Now, I discovered when cleaning that this 500 picofarad cap has got a little chunk out of its coating, which means moisture can get in there. So we're not going to reuse that. We're going to return it with the amp. But I've got a new Vishay 562R 1 kilovolt that will go right there. 500 picofarad. It's the best modern replacement I've found. Let's put the plate resistors back. I'll do all the soldering at once so we have fewer beeps. I need my pliers for this one. There it goes. Get the wires in place. These go to the plates of V2. That one doesn't want to go in. Need to recreate the hook it used to have. Put that capacitor back in place. Now I'll get in here and solder this stuff. Let's zoom out a bit so I have a better overview for you guys. Now we only have to wait for the beep once. And again, with these big eyelets, I'm at 750 degrees. And again, I'm doing a fillet of solder just to fill the eyelet first. And once again, that's all that's really necessary. But we will recreate the Fender domes in just a moment. Success. Let's get some of that excess flux up. All right, clean that up with a tiny little bit of ISO on a paper towel. And then we'll power it up and see if that DC voltage is gone. All right, 385. Oh, the wall voltage has dropped since earlier. All right. $271. Nothing. Nothing. All right, let's see if we still have hum on the reverb. What is causing that thudding? It's related to the standby switch? No. That will be investigated further. I'll bring the reverb up now. The buzz is gone, but there's a bit of a hum. A little bit of scratchiness on the volume and the bass and the reverb pots, so I think those just need to be cleaned. Why do we have scratchiness on that volume pot, but no scratchiness on the treble pot? Let's see. I have no volts on the input to it. Let's bring the up halfway. Let me pull V4 again so we don't get those sounds. That thudding correlates with surges in the roach. That's interesting. We'll get to that later. I have voltage at the wiper of the volume, but don't have voltage at the input. Is that just a bad tube in V2? Let's try swapping V2 with the tube that was in V4. All right, no, it is not the tube. It's going to be a cathode resistor almost certainly. It could possibly be a bad volume pot though, so I will do some stuff afterwards to track that down. I'm more interested right now in that thudding, which is come and gone, and I noticed that when it thudded, the roach lit up. So something is happening there. I don't know whether it's in the entire power supply or just in the vibrato circuit, but that's an interesting thing to have happen. Let's see if it happens if I take it out of standby and then put it back. Yeah, there it is. I wonder if we have a bad standby switch. Standby switches are rated for AC voltage, not DC voltage, but we put DC voltage across on them, fairly high DC voltage. It's possible that the switch is arcing. A lot of little mystery things. I think this video, though, has gotten to a good stopping point. I was going to change out the 3 caps in the LFO and get the slowest speed back to where it should be, and then show how to detick this. I'll tell you how to detick the roach, though. I'm not going to do it right now, but I'll just tell you how it's done. I had thought this was going to be a pretty simple short video just on how to get DC out of that area and the input jacks and the tremolo stuff, but I've got some deeper fish to fry. And I can't do all the troubleshooting on camera. It slows me down too much. But anyway, if I want to get rid of that ticking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install a capacitor, a 10 nanofarad cap from here to here. And this is a 22 nanofarad cap, but pretend it's a 10 nanofarad. It would just sit right there. And you can use almost any capacitor you want as long as it's rated for 500 volts or higher. I might use a ceramic disc, probably use a Panasonic ECQ because they're small and unobtrusive, do the job well. And yeah, it's obviously non-original, but that's not an original component location. And the coating, the covering on this 1 nanofarad cap at the input to the phase inverter is broken off here. And as I pointed out in the other cap, the 500 picofarad, moisture can get in there and that cap can go crazy. So I may replace that cap again with a Vishay 562R to keep the correct sound and behavior, but without the broken body and potential issues that can cause. But I'm going to do a bunch of stuff to see why we're getting popping, and I suspect it might just be as simple as a standby switch, which is intermittent. Until the next video then, thanks for watching.